I drove for Uber for almost 2 years. Then one passenger started requesting me over and over. I found a list under my windshield wiper containing every place I'd been. Someone had been watching me long before I ever noticed. Them.
I started driving for Uber in the fall of 2021, right after I turned 28. I was living outside Eugene, Oregon, renting a small duplex while trying to save enough money to go back to school. Most of my driving happened between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. because that was when the rides paid the best. If you've ever driven nights, you know most shifts are incredibly boring until they suddenly aren't. When I first signed up, I treated it like any other job. I clean the inside of my silver Toyota Camry every afternoon, grab a coffee from the same Chevron station off Highway 99, and start the app while listening to baseball podcasts. I even kept a little notebook in the center console where I'd write down how much I made each night. Sounds nerdy, but seeing the numbers go up kept me motivated. Most passengers fell into 3 groups. College students who were loud for 20 minutes, airport travelers who barely spoke, and bar customers who wanted to tell a complete stranger every mistake they'd ever made. I actually preferred the third group. People open up when they know they'll probably never see you again. One guy explained his divorce. Another spent 30 minutes convincing me aliens were hiding beneath Crater Lake. A woman cried the whole ride because she'd just found out her grandmother had survived cancer. You hear everything. Around Thanksgiving, I started recognizing other drivers around town. There was Mark, who drove an old Honda Pilot covered in fishing stickers. Angela, who always worked mornings. And an older guy named Dennis who'd been doing rideshare since almost the beginning. Dennis had one rule. If somebody asks if you've been watching them, he said, cancel the ride. I laughed. What? He shrugged. They're never joking. It sounded so oddly specific that I remembered it. But honestly, people say weird things all the time. I figured he'd picked up one unstable passenger years ago and turned it into a superstition. December slowed down. College students left town for winter break, so I spent more time doing airport pickups. One Friday around 11:40 p.m., I accepted a ride from a shopping center parking lot. The passenger's name was listed as Eric. 5-star rating. Account created in 2018. Nothing unusual. When I pulled up, nobody was there. I waited the required 5 minutes. Just before I canceled, a man stepped out from behind a row of dark delivery vans. He looked about 40. Brown jacket. Baseball cap. Small black backpack. He opened the rear passenger door. Sorry, he said. Wrong parking lot. No worries. He buckled in. The destination was about 30 minutes outside town. Mostly farmland. The ride started normally. He asked if I'd been busy. I asked if he was visiting family for the holidays. Basic small talk. Then, about halfway there, he asked something strange. Do people ever tell you they've seen the same car following them? I looked in the mirror. Sometimes. What do you tell them? I don't know. Probably coincidence? He nodded slowly. Yeah. Silence. Then he said, almost to himself, I guess that's what they'd want people to think. I smiled politely, didn't respond. Exactly the kind of conversation you don't encourage. When we reached his destination, it wasn't a house. It was an empty gravel turnout beside an old storage building. You sure this is right? Yeah. He got out. Drive safe. 5 stars. No issue. I forgot about him before I made it back to town. 3 nights later, I got another request. Same name. Eric. Different pickup. Different destination. When I arrived, he was already waiting. He got into the back seat. You again, I said. He smiled. Guess so. For most of the ride, he stared out the window. Then he asked, Has anybody asked about me? No. You'd tell me if they did? I don't think passengers can ask us stuff like that. Another long silence. When I dropped him off, he thanked me. Nothing happened. Again. Looking back, I wish something obvious had happened. Instead, everything stayed just normal enough. Over the next month, I drove Eric 4 more times. Always late. Always different pickup locations. Always quiet. Eventually, I stopped thinking he was strange. He became one of those regular passengers every driver eventually gets. One night, he even remembered my coffee order because he'd seen the cup in my console enough times. Large vanilla from Chevron? Yeah. You always get it before your shift. I laughed. I guess I do. It didn't even register how odd that was. Routine makes weird things seem ordinary. Then I found the envelope. It was sitting under my windshield wiper after finishing a ride downtown. Plain white envelope. No stamp. No writing. Inside was one folded sheet of printer paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. December 12th, Chevron 7:56 p.m. December 18th, vacuum at car wash. December 22nd, grocery stop after shift. January 4th, apartment 3:11 a.m. There were dozens of entries. Dates, times, places. Every single one was accurate. At first I assumed somebody had mistaken me for someone else. Then I reached the bottom. The final line read, "You looked behind you today." I hadn't told anyone that. Earlier that afternoon, I'd had this random feeling somebody was watching me while pumping gas. I'd actually turned around. Nobody had been there. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes staring at the paper. Finally, I called the non-emergency police number. The officer who met me looked through the list. "You have any enemies?" "No." "X?" "No." "Online arguments?" "No." He sighed. "It could be somebody messing with you." He took photos. Filed a report. That was it. No fingerprints. No cameras nearby. Nothing. I drove home trying to convince myself it was a prank. I barely slept. The next evening I almost didn't work. Bills won. I turned the app on anyway. Around midnight, Eric requested another ride. I nearly canceled. Instead, I accepted. When he got in, everything felt different. Not because he'd changed, because I couldn't stop wondering if he'd written the list. Halfway through the ride, he asked, "You look tired. Didn't sleep much. Someone bothering you?" I didn't answer. He looked out the window. Then he quietly said, "Sometimes people notice they're being watched." Every hair on my arms stood up. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "Nothing." We reached his destination. He got out. Before closing the door, he said, "Check under your seat." Then he walked away. I waited until he disappeared into the darkness. My hands were shaking. I reached underneath the driver's seat. There was another folded piece of paper. This one had only one sentence. "You missed Tuesday." That was it. No signature. Nothing else. I suddenly remembered. Tuesday. I'd taken the day off because I wasn't feeling well. How would anyone know I'd stayed home? I drove straight to the police station. Different officer this time. He listened. Asked for Eric's information. Unfortunately, rideshare privacy rules meant they couldn't simply hand over passenger details without legal requests. They told me not to accept future rides from him, which sounded great. Except, the next request came from a completely different account. Different name, different photo, different rating. Pickup location 2 blocks away. As soon as I accepted, the destination changed to the same gravel turnout. I canceled immediately. Another request appeared. Canceled. Another. Canceled. 5 requests in less than 2 minutes. Then they stopped. I drove home, locked every door, deleted Uber, deleted Lyft too. I figured that was the end of it. About 6 months later, I got a job delivering medical equipment. No passengers. Regular hours. Life settled down. Mostly. Until one Friday afternoon. I stopped at that same Chevron before work. The cashier smiled. The usual? Yeah. As she handed me my coffee, she frowned. Your friend already paid. My what? The guy in the brown jacket. She pointed toward the parking lot. There was nobody there. I think he just left. I walked outside. The lot was almost empty. Only my van, pickup truck, and, tucked under my windshield wiper, another blank white envelope. I didn't open it there. I drove 20 miles before pulling into a rest area. Inside was a fresh sheet of paper. Only one line. New job. Nice hours. No police report ever went anywhere. Uber later told me the passenger account connected to Eric had been removed for violating platform policies. But they couldn't tell me anything else. I moved to another county the following year. Different apartment. Different routines. Different grocery store. I don't post where I live. I don't check in anywhere online. And every single time I finish filling up my car, I look behind me, just in case someone is still making another list.
Chicago was explained. Then one passenger kept appearing. My phone would ring. I trusted was calling. Sometimes I heard breathing. I heard my own voice.
I started driving for Lyft in Chicago during the winter of 2022. I was 24, working freelance video editing during the day and driving nights to make rent. My favorite shifts were Fridays because airports, bars, and concerts kept me moving almost nonstop until sunrise. I used to think the hardest part of the job was staying awake. I was wrong. Chicago in January has a way of making every street look the same after midnight. Snow piles up against parked cars. Traffic lights reflect off wet pavement. Steam rolls out of subway vents. After a while, every pickup feels like the last one. I drove a black Honda Accord, kept a pack of gum in the center console, and had the same playlist on every night. Mostly old rock songs mixed with podcasts I'd already heard twice. Regular passengers started recognizing me. There was a nurse named Claire who worked 12-hour shifts. A bartender called Vince who always tipped exactly $5. An older woman who took the same ride to Union Station every Wednesday morning without saying more than 2 words. Routine makes you comfortable. Too comfortable. One night, another driver named Miguel parked next to me outside O'Hare while we waited for airport requests. You ever answer a phone call while you're driving? I shrugged. If it's hands-free. He shook his head. I don't anymore. Why? I picked up a guy last year. So? He answered my wife's phone. I laughed. You mean he talked over speaker? Miguel didn't smile. He answered before she even called. I figured he was trying to tell one of those rideshare urban legends every driver seems to collect. After a minute, he laughed too. Forget it. So I did. A week later, around 1:15 in the morning, I accepted a pickup outside a sports bar on the north side. The passenger was listed as Nathan. Late 30s. Business casual. Didn't seem drunk. He climbed into the back seat carrying a laptop bag. Long night? I asked. You could say that. The destination was almost 40 minutes away. Most of the ride was quiet. Then my phone rang through Bluetooth. It was my younger sister, Emma. I pressed the button on the steering wheel. Hey, Em. Silence. Hello. Then I heard breathing. Very light. Like someone standing close to a microphone. Emma? Nothing. I disconnected. Nathan looked up from his phone. Bad connection? Yeah. Probably. A minute later, Emma texted. Didn't call you. Going to bed. I figured Bluetooth had glitched somehow. Technology does weird things. I forgot about it before the ride ended. 3 nights later, another airport pickup. Another long ride. Different passenger. Same thing. My phone lit up. Mom. I answered. Hey. No response. Only breathing. I hung up. Called her back immediately. She answered sounding half asleep. I wasn't calling you. That got my attention. Still, I blamed the cold. Moisture. Bluetooth. Anything but what I was actually thinking. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened 5 more times. Always during rides. Always at night. Always from someone I trusted. My sister. Mom. My best friend Jake. Once even my landlord. Every time. Breathing. Nothing else. No voices. No background noise. Just breathing. I finally replaced my phone. New SIM card. New Bluetooth system in the car. Problem solved. For exactly 4 days. Then I picked up Nathan again. I recognized him immediately. Same jacket. Same laptop bag. He smiled. Hey, you drove me before. I remember. The destination was different this time. Downtown. About 25 minutes. Halfway there, my phone rang again. Jake. I stared at the screen. Nathan noticed. You should answer. I'll call him back. What if it's important? I reluctantly hit accept. Jake. Nothing. Breathing. Then, my own voice, perfectly clear, said, I'm almost there. The call disconnected. Every muscle in my body locked up. Nathan looked out the window as if nothing had happened. You okay? Yeah. You look pale. I didn't answer. When I got home, I called Jake immediately. He swore he'd been asleep for the last hour. Phone on silent. No outgoing calls. No missed calls. Nothing. The call log on my phone still showed the conversation. 3 seconds long. I showed it to a friend who worked in IT. He checked my phone. Carrier records. Bluetooth settings. Everything looked normal. His explanation. Spoofing maybe. Can someone spoof my family's numbers? I guess. Can they use my own voice? He didn't have an answer. A few nights later, the snowstorm hit. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Most drivers logged off early. Surge pricing tripled. I stayed out. Around 2:30 a.m., I accepted a pickup from a nearly empty commuter parking lot. Passenger name. Nathan. Again. He got in carrying the same laptop bag. Same calm expression. You must work late, I joked. I do. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then my dashboard lit up. Emma calling. I ignored it. The phone kept ringing. Ignored. Again. Ignored. Nathan quietly said, She sounds worried. I looked in the mirror. What? You should answer. I said no. The phone stopped. 5 seconds later, it rang again. This time I pulled over. Answered. Before I could speak, Emma screamed. Help me. Then, silence. I threw the car into drive. What hospital? I yelled. No answer. Only breathing. Then Emma's normal voice. Soft. Calm. Wrong turn. The call ended. I immediately called her real number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. 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 Nothing. I was already turning toward her apartment. Nathan suddenly spoke. She isn't home. I slammed the brakes. How do you know that? He looked genuinely confused. You just passed her exit. I stared at him. His expression never changed. I called 911 while driving. They dispatched officers to Emma's apartment. I beat them there. Her car was gone. Apartment empty. No sign of forced entry. 5 minutes later, Emma called me, completely fine. She'd stayed overnight at a friend's place after work. Phone battery had died. She hadn't called me once. Police confirmed it. No emergency. Nothing. I felt ridiculous. Embarrassed. Like I'd completely overreacted. I decided I was done driving nights. One final weekend. Then I'd quit. Saturday was my last shift. Or at least it was supposed to be. Around midnight, Nathan requested another ride. Different account name this time. Different profile picture. Same pickup location. I canceled. Another request. Canceled. Another. Canceled. Finally, I turned the app off. I thought that solved it. As I started driving home, my phone rang. No caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered. My own voice spoke immediately. Check your back seat. The line went dead. I looked in the rearview mirror. Empty. I pulled into a gas station under bright lights. Opened both rear doors. Nothing. I almost laughed at myself. Then I noticed something on the floor behind the passenger seat. A black laptop charger. I hadn't seen it before. I picked it up. Wrapped around it was a sticky note. Simply read. You looked. I dropped it immediately. Called police. They searched the car. Dusted the charger. No usable fingerprints. No cameras at the gas station showed anyone approaching my vehicle. The responding officer suggested a passenger must have forgotten it earlier. Maybe. Except, I'd vacuumed the car before starting that shift. There hadn't been anything on that floor. I know because I always checked. I quit Lyft the next morning. Sold the Accord 2 months later. Bought another car. Changed my phone number. Changed carriers. Even moved apartments. Every now and then, though, my phone still lights up in the middle of the night. No caller ID. I never answer anymore. The strange part isn't that the calls still happen. It's that they always stop after exactly 3 rings. The same number of rings before I used to pick up. And I still don't know whether someone was watching me or waiting for me to answer again.
I drove airport rides around Dallas, and passengers forgot things all the time. Phones, wallets, luggage, but someone left a gray scarf. I reported it, tried to return.
I started driving airport rides in the spring of 2023, about 3 months after moving to a suburb outside Dallas, Texas. I was 31, recently divorced, and trying to make extra money while figuring out what I wanted to do next. Most of my trips started before sunrise because that's when business travelers filled the app. People assume the early morning hours are the safest. That's what I thought too. I had a routine that never really changed. My alarm went off at 3:45 every morning. Coffee from the same gas station. Quick vacuum if the floor mats looked dirty. Then I'd park in the airport waiting lot until the first request came through. Airport passengers are usually predictable. They're tired. Checking emails. Dragging oversized suitcases. Most don't want to talk. That suited me just fine. There were a handful of drivers I'd see almost every morning. We'd wave at each other, complain about surge pricing disappearing too fast, and joke about which terminal always had the longest pickup line. One driver named Carl had been doing airport rides for years. He had one habit I never understood. Every time a passenger got out, he'd walk around his SUV before accepting another ride. Not just a quick glance. He'd open every door. Look underneath. Check the trunk. Every single time. One morning I finally asked why. He shrugged. You'd be surprised what people leave behind. Wallets. Sometimes. What else? Carl paused. The things that bother me aren't the valuables. What do you mean? If you ever find something in your car that you know wasn't there before. He looked toward the pickup lanes. Don't keep it. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone chimed and he drove away. I figured he was talking about drugs or stolen property. It seemed like reasonable advice. I forgot about it. About 2 weeks later, I picked up a passenger named Melissa just after 5:30 a.m. She was heading to the airport for a conference. Laptop bag. Rolling suitcase. Coffee in one hand. She spent most of the ride answering emails. As we pulled up to Terminal C, she smiled. Thanks for the quiet ride. No problem. She got out. I helped unload her suitcase. Then I drove back toward the waiting lot. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message through the Rideshare app. Passenger says they left a gray scarf in your vehicle. I checked the back seat. Nothing. I replied that I couldn't find it. Simple. End of story. Or so I thought. That afternoon, after finishing my shift, I cleaned the car. When I lifted the cargo mat in the trunk, I found a neatly folded gray scarf. I didn't remember seeing it before. It looked expensive. Soft wool. No tags. No initials. I figured I'd simply missed it. I reported it through the app and left it in the trunk. Melissa never responded. After a week, I assumed she'd bought another one. I almost donated it. Instead, it stayed folded in the trunk. Over the next month, strange little things started happening. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make me second-guess myself. A bottle of water I was certain I'd thrown away would be sitting in the cup holder the next morning. The passenger side seat would be adjusted farther back than I remembered. My dashcam would occasionally restart without recording the previous few minutes. I blamed myself. Long hours. Early mornings. Memory isn't perfect. Then I picked up a man named Daniel outside a downtown hotel. Mid-50s. Suit. One carry-on bag. As soon as he got in, he looked toward the trunk instead of sitting back. You still have it. What? The scarf. I laughed. Excuse me? You should have gotten rid of it. Do you know the passenger who left it? He looked at me in the rearview mirror. I've never met her. For the rest of the ride, he didn't say another word. When we reached the airport, he got out, wished me a good day, and disappeared into the crowd before I could ask what he'd meant. I checked the trunk as soon as I parked. The scarf was exactly where I'd left it. I finally decided enough was enough. I grabbed the scarf and tossed it into a donation bin outside a church on my way home. Problem solved. Or so I hoped. The next morning, I opened my trunk to put my emergency kit inside. The gray scarf was folded neatly in the same spot. I stood there staring at it for nearly a minute. I knew I had thrown it away. I even remembered hearing it land inside the metal donation box. I convinced myself I must have accidentally grabbed something else. It sounded ridiculous, but it made more sense than the alternative. So I drove back. The donation bin had already been emptied. No way to check. I drove home with the scarf still in my trunk. A few days later, I picked up an elderly woman from a retirement community. She settled into the back seat, looked around, and smiled politely. Halfway to her destination, she suddenly asked, "How long has someone been leaving gifts for you?" "What?" She looked confused. "I thought that's what the scarf was." "I don't know what you mean." She didn't answer. When I stopped in front of her building, she leaned forward before getting out. Some things aren't forgotten because they're lost. Then she left. People say odd things in rideshares all the time. I tried not to think about it. The turning point came on a humid Thursday morning. I picked up a businessman from Love Field Airport. Normal trip. Normal conversation. Nothing unusual. After he got out, I heard a soft thump from the trunk while waiting at a red light. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot. Opened the trunk. The scarf was still there. So was something else. A small wrapped gift box. Plain brown paper. No ribbon. No label. I was certain it hadn't been there that morning. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was an old motel key. Not a key card. An actual metal key with a faded plastic tag. Room 12. No motel name. Nothing else. I drove straight to the police station. The officer took the key. Asked where I'd found it. I explained everything. He listened patiently. Finally he said, "If someone planted it, we'll check for prints." A week later they called me. No fingerprints. No identifiable motel. No missing persons case connected to the number. Just a key. That should have been the end of it. Instead, 2 days later, the key was back, sitting on top of the folded scarf in my trunk. The evidence bag from the police station was gone. This key wasn't inside any bag. It was just there. I never told the officer. I knew how it would sound. I quit airport driving that same week. Sold the car a month later. Before handing over the keys, I removed every personal item, vacuumed every compartment, checked the trunk twice. The scarf wasn't there anymore. For the first time in months, it was simply gone. I remember feeling relieved, almost embarrassed that I'd let something so strange get into my head. 3 months passed. Life felt normal again. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed with an email from the dealership where I'd traded in the car. The subject line read, "Did you mean to leave this behind?" There was one attached photo. It showed the open trunk of my old car. Folded neatly in the center was the same gray scarf. Resting on top of it was the old motel key. The dealership employee told me they had cleaned that trunk twice before finding them. When I asked if they could throw everything away, he said they already had. A week later, he emailed again. Just one sentence. "It came back this morning." I never replied. Maybe it was an elaborate prank. Maybe several unrelated coincidences somehow lined up perfectly. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that, even now, if I see a forgotten scarf lying on the back seat of a taxi or rideshare, I don't touch it. I get out. And I wait for the next car instead.